Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Beer Rating with Sean Connors. Last week we were looking at a Belgian beer, Delirium Christmas. It was Christmas beer. I think I gave it a 3.5. This week we're back to Canada. We're going to try a Muskoka Schinnicked Stout. So it's a stout. I'm assuming I'm pronouncing it right. Schinnicked. Schinnicked Stout from Muskoka Brewery. We'll pour it up. Actually quite surprised. Stouts normally have a really fairly heavy head, creamy thick head. I was expecting more of a head, but it's actually definitely got the color of a stout. Normally a stout is like a dark brown or black type thing. So it's got the color. I'm just surprised about the head. I'll let that sit for a second. The Muskoka Stout, the Schinnicked Stout, it actually has a best before date on the bottom. Or they call it fresh as by. You'll see that in a lot of craft breweries, craft beers. They'll always have, not always, a lot of them have dates on the bottom. So if you're picking them up, just have a look. You know, you don't want to get a beer that's, you know, close to its best before date. Especially if you're buying something imported in, it's always worthwhile to give it a check. I'm going to give it my initial taste. It definitely smells like a stout if you ever had one before. Kind of like coffee, chocolate type thing. It's a dark taste. It's definitely got a coffee taste to it. It's a little bit different. I like Guinness Stout. I haven't had one in a while, and I was expecting it to be pretty close to that, but it's actually a little bit unique. The can itself, it's got a nice little picture on it, a guy there sitting in the water, kind of cold. The back of it has a little story. It says, Schinnicked is that numbing gasp for breath feeling when you plunge into Muskoka Lake for a chilly late night dip. To warm you up afterwards, we created this rich velvety stout infused with Muskoka Roastery signature lumberjack roast coffee. So there you go, there's the coffee taste I've been getting. And it says, check your date as our beer is best fresh, a result of our pure, natural, unfiltered brewing process. And as I said, the date's on the bottom. Got a nice can, nice little story to it, but when it comes right down to it, it's all about what's in the can. So this is, it's definitely, I can really taste the coffee. I'm not a coffee drinker. It's not a bad flavor, but it's definitely a little bit of a surprise, a little bit of a kick. Okay, the beer itself, it's an oatmeal stout. There's different types of stout. There's Irish stout, there's milk stout. This is an oatmeal stout, which is pretty similar to an Irish stout, a little bit different. That's Muskoka Brewery. Muskoka, it's Ontario, a couple hours north of Toronto, around that area. Like I said, dark color. I haven't made up my mind about it yet. The coffee it's a lot stronger than I thought it would be. It's kind of throwing me off. I'm not a big coffee drinker, as I mentioned, but it's not a bad beer. I'm not going to knock it there, but I just haven't made up my mind yet. Oatmeal stouts are different. Obviously, they use oatmeal. And you might be asking, okay, why would they use oatmeal as opposed to barley? Well, different grains can be used for different beers, and the oatmeal is, I believe it came actually from Scotland. Actually, oats are pretty common up around that way, so I guess, if they couldn't get barley or they wanted to stretch their barley, it wasn't as available as something else, they substitute it with oats. So then you got oatmeal stout. I'm looking at it, it's not really a black. It's almost like a dark, really, really dark brown, and when you get the light shine through it, almost like a little bit of reddish. So that's kind of neat. So we'll just go on that for another couple minutes. You might notice every week I'm using a different glass. somebody mentioned me about the, what's with the different types of glasses. So I'm just basically going to talk about today, while I'm enjoying the beer and a few minutes to savor it, about the different, or the most common type of glasses you're going to get for a stout. This is, if you go to Ireland and you order, Guinness Stout, the famous Irish Stout, most places this is the type of glass you're going to get. Excuse me. It's known as an English tulip glass, but even though it's called an English tulip, it's most common from what I've seen and what I've researched in Ireland more than anything else. It's, within the 20th century. Guinness is famous for it. This is the same one. This is actually Guinness. You got their harp there. A little bit smaller size, but not that big of a difference. Then we have what we call your shaker point. This is actually more of a North American thing, specifically in the United States. It was actually never really a glass. It was part of a shaker point, so this was the bottom bag. They started doing it, like I said, around the mid-'80s, and it kind of caught on, and the stores like it because it's easy for stacking and whatnot. So there you go, your shaker point. And this is another one you'll see quite a bit in Europe. This is what they call a nonic point. It's quite similar to the tulip, the English tulip. You got the same shape, however, the nonic one has more of a bulge up here. No big reason for it. It was started becoming common in the 1960s. You'll see it a lot in England and the UK for when they're pouring their ales. And it's a little bit easier to hold just with that little grasser. I guess, you get a few too many. You can hold in your hand a little bit easier. This is one actually I've never seen a lot of for a stout, but it's a stout porter glass. It used to be stout or porters, which are quite similar. And basically, it said with the stem, it shows off the color of the stout and whatnot. So you might see that one. And of course, the beer mug. Everybody's seen a beer mug. Beer mugs are pretty well common for every type of beer, and it's not uncommon to see it in a stout. So those are your basic glasses that you'll see with a stout. You go somewhere, they might have their own version, whatever, but those are the most common. Now, what all these glasses have in common, they're all heavier glass for the most part. And one thing I've read is said strong beer, a strong glass is what you need for it. It's got a wide rim, and normally with a stout, as I mentioned earlier, this was the exception, you'll get a really, really heavy head. And so the large rim actually kind of holds the head in, they say. It traps it in. And the head itself actually, it's almost like a trap for the different aromas of the beer. So, you're trapping the different elements of the beer so they don't go off into the ear, so you savor it when you taste it. Whatever the case might be. Alright, this beer, like I said, I'm not a coffee drinker, and it's a little bit more coffee taste than I prefer. But it's not a bad beer, don't get me wrong. I wouldn't say no to another Schinnicked. My rating for this week, I'm going to go with I'm going to say a 3. It's a good beer. I definitely have another, but it's not something I'm going to rush out and pick up a 6-pack or whatever. But if you like stouts and you want something a little bit different, give it a try. So next week, I'm going to look at, excuse me while I grab beer out of the fridge, a Austrian beer, Salzburger Stiegel. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. You go from the real fancy can until a pretty plain label beer. So we'll see how that works out next week. So I want to thank everybody for taking the time to hang out with me and enjoy this Schinnicked Stout. Like I said, check it out on the weekend. It's coming up soon. And always remember, enjoy responsibly. Cheers.